The Warlock build I'm going to show you today is easily one of the most powerful builds I've ever used in the Crucible, and when set up correctly can give you over 20 seconds of Devour on your timer and turn you into an unkillable menace in the Crucible. After running this build for a single day, I saw my KD shoot up and was able to lock down an entire side of a map all by myself, and this was before I even discovered this build's final form. So if you're looking for a build that has insane energy regen, infinite Devour, and the ability to dish out a ton of damage, then this video is for you. Now let's get into this video, and if you enjoyed this build, consider dropping a like as it helps support the channel. To get this build started, we have to discuss our exotic of choice first, and that's the new exotic boots Secant Filaments, with the exotic perk Devouring Rift. Casting Empowering Rift will grant you Devour. Damage dealt by you and your allies from within your Empowering Rift will disrupt combatants. How this exotic works is upon popping Empowering Rift, you will immediately be granted Devour with the standard 10-second timer. But it's not just granting the Devour effect, but also the immediate health regen as well. Meaning you can pop this Rift when weakened by your enemy and immediately be back to full health. This is a game changer for Empowering Rift and makes this exotic great for baiting in opponents who think you're weak or challenging enemies who aren't expecting you to be full health. Because of this exotic, a lot of this build is focused on getting our Rift as quickly as possible and doing everything possible to help activate or extend the duration of Devour. Because of this, Void 3.0 is what we're going to be running subclass wise, and starting with the super, I find all options to be fairly good. Yes, even Nova Warp. Shout out to Maximal GFX for changing my mind. That being said, while I was running this build, I did run Nova Warp a majority of the time, but there were definitely times I wish I had either Nova Bomb variants instead. For your aspects, it's no surprise you want to be running Feed the Void, as this ensures that any Void ability kills will trigger or extend that Devour timer. This is also great for those rare times we don't have our Rift to guarantee we have other ways to activate Devour. For our second aspect, you want to run Child of the Old Gods, and the great thing about this aspect is that when running Empowering Rift, the Void Soul will give you small chunks of health as it drains your opponent, which will only crank up our survivability when combined with Devour. You also get the added benefit that if a Void Soul gets a kill, this will further extend the duration of Devour and give us a nice chunk of our Rift energy back, giving you some nice synergy between abilities, while also giving us a way to heal while inside an Empowering Rift. Before I get into our fragments, I wanted to briefly mention my community Discord where you can show off your roles, builds, and even Destiny fashion. There you'll also find a screenshot of today's build in the build section. Link is in the description. For your fragments, the first fragment I recommend is Echo of Leeching, which causes melee final blows to trigger health regen for you and nearby allies, and grants plus 10 resilience. This fragment is great for when enemies push into your rift and allows you to come out of those slap fights with max health, can be a lifesaver in any close quarters engagement. Next, I recommend Echo of Remnants, which extends lingering grenade effects, which touching on a grenade really quickly, you should be running Axion bolts. These grenades are great for getting easy finishing kills or weakening enemies and giving us another really easy way to activate Devour. Then pairing this fragment with Axions will ensure they track enemies for even longer. Echo of Expulsion is the next fragment I recommend, and this fragment will help with doing extra chip damage to your enemies or getting a collateral kill off of an Axion bolt kill. For the last fragment, I was originally running Echo of Dilation mainly for the boost in intellect for an insane stat distribution on my Warlock. But then I decided to really double down and go all in on this build, and that's when I swapped to Echo of Persistence. Void buffs applied to you, Invisibility, Overshield, and Devour have increased duration, and on Warlock this gives a minus 10 to recovery. Without Echo of Persistence, your standard Devour timer when popping a Rift is 11 seconds. Then when equipping Echo of Persistence, our Devour duration jumps up to 17 seconds. But not only does it increase the duration, but also the duration ceiling of Devour. With this fragment, you can get up to an insane 22 seconds of Devour, which feels like a lifetime. This fragment made chaining Devour kills a breeze and literally made me feel like I always had Devour active, which meant I was constantly getting tons of grenade energy back, tossing Axion bolts, and extending the duration longer, popping another Rift to refresh Devour, then getting health regen from Child of the Old Gods. It got to a point where I felt like everything I did on my character was causing Devour to proc, which is what I love about this build so much, and that's its ease of use. With so many ways to proc Devour, it's almost impossible to not have crazy uptime with this ability. Thanks so much for watching this far into the video, and if you enjoyed so far, consider subscribing so you don't miss any future build videos like this one. Stats and armor mods are key pieces we can use to really get as much out of this build as possible, and starting with our most important stat first, and that's going to be recovery, since our recovery ties directly into our Rift cooldown, and the Rift is a central part of this build. Because of this, I don't recommend anything less than 100 recovery, so we can be dropping our Empowering Rift and triggering Devour as much as possible. The next most important stat to invest in is Discipline, to ensure you're able to throw as many Axion bolts as possible, and to give you the most opportunities to trigger Devour or extend its duration. And here, I landed at 70 Discipline, which is pretty good, but if you need to invest in other stats like recovery, I wouldn't recommend going lower than 50 Discipline. Next in terms of importance is Intellect, and I landed at 70 Intellect here, which in terms of diminishing returns is the sweet spot, and again, wouldn't recommend going lower than 60 Intellect if you can help it. Now looking at my overall stats, I hate that my strength is at 20, but I mainly blame the terrible roll I have on my exotic boots for that, but typically I like my strength stat to land at the 50-ish mark. For resilience, I also prefer 60, but I wouldn't prioritize it over any other stats I mentioned. Lastly, we have mobility, which I don't find valuable in general, but even less so in this build that focuses so much on being stationary and abusing your rift. For your armor mods, this is where we can continue to enhance the overall build. For your helmet and chest mods, you want to use the standard targeting and unflinching mods that complement your current weapons, which I'll get into in a minute. For your arms, you want to use the reloader that shortens the reload of your primary weapon, and fastball to make throwing those axiom bolts a little easier. For your legs, I actually recommend a scavenger perk for your special weapon to ensure you have as much ammo as possible. For your class item, I recommend running a stasis affinity for this build in particular, so you can utilize double utility quick start, which gives you back class ability energy once you use your rift, allowing you to get your rift as often as possible, and really complements this build well. Getting into the weapons you want to use with this build, and this is where this build reaches its final form. Initially, I was going to recommend No Time to Explain because of its ability to 2-burst along with the turret buddy you get after hitting some headshots. But I felt this build still wasn't reaching its full potential, and that's when I threw on DMT and simultaneously threw out any self-respect I had out the window. But in all seriousness, DMT is already crazy strong, but with an empowering rift, it can now easily 2-tap opponents. Pair that with secant filaments, adding in the instant devour, and you have a serious problem on your hands. Once I added DMT to this build, it truly felt unfair. I was 2-tapping everyone while getting instant health regen, and then throwing axions without a care in the world. But if you don't want to be that person, I would still recommend any longer range weapon for this build. Now, as you might have guessed, as you 2-tap multiple people with your empowering rift and get your health right back, naturally people want to come straight back to you and AP you with a shoddy. This is where my special weapon recommendation comes in, and it's a new fusion, Likely Suspect. The role I have crafted here is small bore, particle repeater, enhanced firmly planted, and successful warm up with a ranged masterwork. This rapid fire fusion is amazing for baiting shotgun rushers and is the perfect complement to this build, especially with successful warm up, which allows this fusion to charge insanely fast after a kill. There's a reason I haven't really used my shotgun much since crafting this weapon, and it's because this fusion is just so damn good, and I'm sure a lot of you are already seeing it a lot in the Crucible, so I hugely recommend taking the time to craft this weapon and add it to your arsenal because it greatly complements this build. With DMT and Likely Suspect, you have the long range and close to mid range all locked down. For heavy, I would run whatever your heart desires, but personally, I barely even used my heavy as the combination of DMT, Likely Suspect, Empowering Rift, and Devour made it feel pointless. Overall, this build creates amazing synergy between your abilities and sets you up to have Devour procced almost indefinitely while 2-tapping your opponents with DMT and melting any shotgun rushers that get close to you with a rapid fire fusion. If you enjoyed this video, consider checking out my overall Void Warlock build at the top, or my video showing you how to master Warlock at the bottom.